Welcome to episode 6 of the Arc-Aholics. If you're into Arc Raiders, hang out with us as we discuss Arc Raiders and other extraction shooter related topics. All content creator guests have their channels posted in the description. I encourage you to check them all out. Like, comment, sub, and all that fun stuff. Now, on with the show.
All right, Embark dropped off some good knowledge. Well, I mean, it's a lot of knowledge in terms of we don't have a lot to go off of these days. So any little thing that we can grasp onto is a great nugget to start talking about. Today I have our resident content creator, Rockhoundblack. Thank you again for joining us.
It's great to be back. I've thoroughly enjoyed every podcast that we've done so far, so I'm pleased to be here.
Glad to hear it. I absolutely hate every single one. Kidding. So we're going to start off with getting into the announcements that they dropped in on the Discord, and we're going to go over a little bit of those topics there and kind of see what we can kind of glean from that. So we'll go in the middle of the section here. I'm going to read them briefly, try to paraphrase them as fast as I can. If you want to see the official announcement, you can go on to their Discord. I'll leave a link on down below, okay? One of the things they did point out is that they learned a lot from the Tech Test 2 in terms of weapons, gadgets. They have particular pillars that they're guiding principles on how to shape the combat in Arc Raiders, right? So they felt they have a few things that were kind of bending those rules. And so that was kind of interesting. They did talk about how you should feel when you engage with a person is basically the combat is beats and has flows. It isn't just an instant pop and the combat ends. Now, Rockhound, do you feel like they kind of nailed it? And what do you think that they, did they miss, if anything?
Well, actually, the first thing I was going to say was it's really interesting that they've posted this info and the video that came along with it. And I think it's a really nice way for them to ease back into some marketing after, the events around Summer Game Fest, which obviously didn't go quite as well as they had hoped from a marketing point of view. And just by dropping this on us, we really had no expectations for it. And I kind of foresee that they'll perhaps continue this where they just present us with something that we didn't expect over the next little while and kind of ease people back into, okay, there's some cool stuff coming through and we're feeling a bit better about how things have gone and the lead up to the release of the game. So I'm really pleased that they've done this, and I hope they continue to do it. Yeah, everything I read in the release kind of made a lot of sense. Like I was reading about them thinking that the shotguns were overpowered, or that the speed of fight sometimes was a little too fast. All of these things resonated with me. Do you kind of feel the same?
Yeah, the actual meat of everything kind of put together, it told me that it came from developers that A, were listening, and B, genuinely played their own game. And I know that sounds kind of silly because, when someone hears that, they're like, wait, what, developers don't play their own game? I feel like, as the cycle refugee, I can earnestly say a lot of the Jaeger teams, when they spoke in interviews, it gave the impression that they truly didn't actually play their own game in the same way the rest of the community did. Same thing can be said in terms of like Gray Zone Warfare, when they put out the very first in-game raid. It felt very clinical, very dry compared to what the actual game normally looks like. But this release to me speaks in a way that, like, yes, this is completely representative of my experience in that Tech Test 2, and to hear them say it in the exact same way gives me a lot of hope, in that they are A, listening, and B, actually actively playing the game in the exact same manner that I am.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, so recently, you might have caught it, I had interviewed two of the animation team from the finals. And during that interview, I asked them about how often they get to play, either the finals and Arc Raiders. And they said that pretty much the entire development team from both sides play each other's games. And they have, I think they said 3 play sessions a week where they're playing the games. And obviously, if they've been working on the finals and they end up playing Arc Raiders, they'll experience new things just like we would as a player going into a little bit blind. Maybe not quite as much as us, but that I thought was great that they have that. Not only are the teams kind of divided between the two games, but they're also playing each other's games, so they get that kind of feedback from one another, just like they would from players. And it kind of comes across in this post as well. It's almost like it was written by someone who is a player and a developer at the same time.
Oh, for sure. I can only imagine. Like, I know I have several other creator friends like you, in terms of people we organize with and interact with. I even have a cousin who does this, and so oftentimes some of the best feedback you can get is someone who watches your content, but also makes content themselves, so they kind of know what goes into it. And so I can imagine like having a developer in house that's working on the finals, and they're going to come over and play the Arc Raiders, and they're like, yeah, this animation's this animation that, and they can give their professional criticism while also looking at it from, again, like you said, not quite a blind, it's a little bit more fresh than someone who's been in the weeds that may be missing things because they've been in it so long.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the other thing, the game was well received at Tech Test too, and I would say most people considered most of the combat to be pretty blimmin' good. And so the things they're talking about here, they're pretty minor things, really. I mean, there's some things that, they definitely need to work on. Like they talked about shield swapping became a bit of a meta for people carrying a second shield and so on, and that's got to be resolved. But these are things they probably didn't necessarily do themselves as developers while they were playing. They might have thought, oh, it's possible, but it's not really how I play. But of course, the community is going to push those things to the limit. So I feel like everything they've talked about, they're all kind of fairly minor things. There's nothing major that they came back with that's going to completely change the way we saw the game from Tech Test 2.
I think because you don't view it necessarily because it's major, but it's kind of a good show of their work ethic in the sense that if it's not perfect, it's not ready, which clearly kind of shows that, hey, the game, a lot of people would say the game is ready to come out, but to them it's not. And so you can kind of say, hey, they're a bit of perfectionists. Well, I think anyone who's willing to say Embark are perfectionists because the Tech 2 test is basically worthy of release, I think maybe the bar has been collectively driven so low by other developers putting out like early accesses that we're willing to accept a game that isn't necessarily as polished as the developers would like it to be. And so when they say weapons like the Pregio and the Tempest, they had such short time to kills comparative to everything else, it was one of those things where it's like, yeah, the vast majority of guns are in line with our method, our what do we want in terms of our flow of combat. But these two guns in particular, and they'll point out a couple of other things as well, are not up to snuff. And so for them, that's enough to be like, nope, we're fixing that. And I can appreciate that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the gaming community, perhaps we're getting kind of, I don't know if used to, but maybe beaten down to the point where we accept that games come out maybe sort of 60 to 70% ready, and to actually have a game like Arc Raiders, which you might consider 80 to 90% ready, it's very easy to perceive it as being, oh, just release it now. But clearly they want it to be in the 95 to 100 before they put it out.
And I think a couple of things here, like we talked about the Tempest and the Appreciate. Did you have an extensive experience with either of those two guns?
No, I didn't actually. I did use both of them during Tech Test 2. I tended to use the Renegade quite a lot, and the Anvil and the Venator. I really enjoyed that. So no, I didn't use the Tempest, and what was the other one? The Arpeggio.
The Arpeggio, yeah.
Yeah, that much, yeah.
The Appreciate I got a good amount of time in. I don't typically gravitate towards burst fire weapons in games all that much, though I recognize the fact that like had I been more active in terms of trying to make that gun work for me, it would have been very good. I instantly recognized this gun is extremely accurate. It's high firing. It's not that hard to build, and so I just didn't realize it had that much potential in terms of kill potential. Because,
and I was going to say, I think that's actually something that I've noticed. I've been watching a bunch of streams following the end of the tech test, some of them for hours and hours at length. And quite often, people that are playing will kind of give up on a gun when maybe they've made one upgrade to it, and they haven't actually worked out that if they had taken it all the way through, it's actually super strong.
Oh, for sure. Like the Rattler is a perfect example of this.
Yeah, exactly. I think the Rattler is a perfect example where it comes across as pretty weak out of the box, but once you upgrade it, it's actually towards the other end of the scale.
Yeah, it's actually pretty absurd if you think about it. It's like a really, really, really cheap gun. You upgrade it just to level 3 if you want to. You can do level 4 again, but that's where the resources start to get a little bit more rare. But the level 2 to the level 3 upgrades are like really easy to make, and it turns into a pretty beefy option. Whereas the Appreciate is the same thing. That's the thing in general. I like about all the guns, but some guns are just good at right out the box.
Yeah, and I like that we're going to have that opportunity when the game releases to kind of learn which ones might not be great to start with, but they're actually worth spending time with. And it might take a while for the community to kind of figure out actually what are the strongest weapons when you upgrade everything versus out of the box. I like that, compared to a game like the finals where there aren't really any upgrades to weapons at all, apart from changing sights and so on. And the meta or the strongest weapons become apparent straight away. But I like the idea that we're going to have to sort of grow into it.
And the variability of conflict zones help, make larger, swaths of meta as opposed to having just the same guns always, because you're going to come into different engagement ranges and different engagement situations.
Exactly, so. Like Buried City versus the openness of Spaceport, for instance.
For sure. Like I would only ever bring an Osprey when I was going to Spaceport, only ever, because I knew that one I'd probably get some value out of it. Everything else was just kind of a iffy toss-up, so I wouldn't bother.
Yeah. Did you enjoy that weapon? I actually never got the opportunity to use it.
Funny enough, the way you talked about weapons before was my exact journey with this gun. And same thing with the Renegade. It's like I just tried it regularly. I'm like, this gun's not worth it. I'm not bringing it, blah, blah, blah. And then three or four upgrades later, I'm like, oh, you know what? It's not that bad.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. I think the Embark have already stated that they wanted to limit down the amount of weapons that could shoot and kill at longer ranges, because they wanted the fight to feel a little bit more medium to close range. And so I understand that the Osprey is probably going to be one of few guns that can actually reach out and touch people that way. But in my experience with that gun, I feel like it's a really long range Renegade. It's extremely accurate. The bullet drop off is minimal. The speed on the round is very fast, right? So it's really, really tailor built for that. However, with the bolt action going back and forth in and out of sights, and if you're engaging at the ranges in which you're better off with the Osprey than you are with the Renegade, chances are you're not going to be able to finish that person off like afterwards.
Yeah, maybe unless you're a third party and they've been, maybe there's been two teams fighting and only one player's come out of it, in total out of 6 players. And if you're third partying them from distance, then it might well be worth it, because you might have the opportunity to go and loot the entire two down squads.
For sure. And I think I can only think of like one maneuver in particular, and I even put this on a gameplay video as well, where we were going from one tower to arrivals, my son. So I was basically covering him. We were going its roundabout way for him to get onto the ladder. And so I was getting on somewhere high. And I was able to cover the area right above the ladder so he wouldn't get killed as soon as he got up there. But at those ranges, the Renegade was perfectly fine. So it shot faster too. So it's one of those things where the ranges in which the Osprey is useful gets a bit like, I don't know, frivolous in terms of like, if you're really engaging someone from that far away, you're probably just stat padding, at that point, or trying to go for those player PvP damage achievements.
Did you have much use of the SMGs?
Oh yes. I swear by the Stitcher. I think that gun is super unappreciated. And there's a reason for it, I think, because of the shotguns and all that stuff we'll talk about here in just a moment. But the Stitcher is probably one of the best budget weapons there are, in terms of like, it's super easy to build. Attachments have such a huge benefit on it, because like that's one of the few guns that's good right out the gate, because the benefits you get from it are reload time and stability, the horizontal recoil rate. I'm pretty good at managing recoil at this point, so that's not really a big incentive for me. The reload speed is helpful. However, I found that just putting a small amount of investment in the form of an extended magazine makes that gun extremely lethal.
Yeah, I used it a lot as well. I think usually I would have the Stitcher and say the Renegade or the Venator, sometimes the Anvil. So you've got that sort of hard-hitting single shot kind of, or semi-automatic versus, we had a few occasions where we literally just ran into another squad, like come around the corner and everyone's sort of standing out in the open in front of each other. And the Stitcher was great for just pushing them back immediately, so they had to seek cover, and then you could do the same and kind of regroup.
Oh yeah, just mag dump right there on the spot. What was your experience with the Pharaoh?
I used that a bit as well. That's the slower reloading one. It's a single shot, right?
Yeah, it's the breech loading, the very first heavy ammo weapon you have.
Exactly. Yeah, I enjoyed it. It's certainly really good for taking out a lot of the arc and, within a couple of shots, and the likes of the turrets and those kind of things. So yeah, I used it quite a bit. I enjoyed it, but I think in the end I kind of enjoyed using the Renegade more once it was upgraded.
And ultimately, the Pharaoh and the Stitcher, I think both are really great options. I'll enjoy putting together a guide in terms of like how to start off playing the game with those two guns. It's really great budget loadout. It's like you can be fairly beefy as a player with minimal investment with like a Stitcher and a Pharaoh. Gives you a lot of versatility. But I think once you play the game a little bit more and you require a little bit more materials, the Anvil starts in my mind started to become a bit of like an automatic bring in because it was just so versatile in everything that it did. And it looks like Embark kind of said the same thing. So bringing on to the next section here, they did point out the anvil. It was a bit too all well-rounded in longer ranges as well as closer ranges. And for them, they said it started cannibalizing the rifles. At that point, the rifles weren't as useful.
Yeah, exactly. That rings so true.
Right. And so for me, like the anvil was essentially a semi-automatic Pharaoh. And the Pharaoh, it's a heavy ammo weapon.
Mm-hmm.
You shoot it, armor comes off, arc dies. It does a good amount of damage to players as well. But as soon as you bring it down to a semi-automatic, it's ungodly. Really, it's just really good at that point. It's a viable mid-range, not even just a viable, it's extremely strong mid-range because of the fact that third-person shooter games, because you can peek, so there's that peek mechanic. So you kind of just swivel around between shots. You come out, pop, come out, pop, come out, pop. And because of the speed in which you can do it and how accurate it could be, I immediately saw that the anvil, it was going to need to be tweaked. I didn't know how it was going to be tweaked without making it complete garbage. But what was your impression of the anvil?
Yeah, I thought it was really strong. It's funny, when we're talking about all these weapons, I never really felt like anything, maybe one of the shotguns, the El Toro, I didn't think was that great, but most of the weapons I felt were reasonably balanced for the stage of development the game's at. There was nothing that I was like, oh, this is just junk, or this is so OP that it's the only weapon you can use. I felt like they were all within range of coming into a reasonable balance. So yeah, I used the anvil a lot. I'm trying to think. When I had the chance, I actually switched from the anvil to the Venator because I like the ability just to knock off more rounds a little bit more quickly. So I kind of had the Stitcher for mag dumping, and then the Venator was kind of like one step closer to an SMG than the anvil, if that makes sense.
I felt like a lot of the pistols were effectively just semi-automatic rifles, like essentially battle rifles.
Yeah. That's a good way of putting it. Exactly. So they probably need to make that separation a little bit clearer. Maybe by reducing the range for the pistols.
I always find it interesting how to balance certain types of weapon types in games, right? As a former saw gunner, right? LMGs are kind of they're like my pet peeve when it comes to how to balance LMGs in games, because you can't truly balance them in games while making them balanced or making them accurate to their counterparts, especially if you're doing a realistic type game. But like pistols, for me, that's another one. It's like, how do you convey the ergonomics of a pistol in like tight spaces, which is where they will shine, versus something else. And I always felt like a lot of times the value of what the game brings isn't worth it. One thing I think could do it, though, is that since the weapon swapping in this game is fairly, I wouldn't call it slow, but it's not immediate. It's kind of like a very deliberate action you have to choose to do. I feel like if you just made the pistols swap to extremely fast, but even if you had like their bloom a little bit wider so they wouldn't be used as a battle rifle anymore, but as a actual backup weapon, I think that could be a good route. What do you think?
Yeah, I like that. That's good. I think that's a great take.
And the shotguns, you mentioned the El Toro, but the big boy on the block was of the Volcano. They even mentioned it on there. I think everyone I've ever talked to who got a chance to play against or with that gun pretty much agrees it was absolutely broken. And according to Embark, they kind of agree. It looks like they're going to basically nerf it, but still allow you to bring it to what tech level test 2 was after some decent amount of upgrades. I'm not sure. I think the Volcano, the fact that it was just a semi-automatic shotgun that effectively hit just as hard as the El Toro, which was significantly slower shooting, it's going to make it a pretty precarious gun to balance, honestly, without making it basically garbage.
Yeah, I remember that I somehow came across a fully upgraded one, and I had like 2 rounds where I got to use it and absolutely loved it before I lost it, which was a shame. But
that's how it goes.
It was great to use while I had it.
I think I had the same thing with the Bobcat. I'm gonna embarrass myself. I think I had a Bobcat for 1 round, or actually I had 2 Bobcats. I found one, then I got killed by a bison, so that was embarrassing. And then the other one I got into one gunfight, whiffed almost every single one of my shots and got killed immediately. So it was not a happy moment for the Bobcat and me on that point in time. But I think it's interesting because the Volcano was way more readily available for everybody on the match. Everyone I talked to basically said the Volcano was basically everywhere, but the Bobcats and Tempest not so much. I feel like maybe in the Embark did talk about the Tempest a little bit in terms of them needing to nerf that a little bit too. I feel like maybe the purple guns themselves might have been across the board really good. It's just that most people got to experience Volcanoes predominantly, which is why it got a lot of the attention. What do you think?
Here's a thought that I was just thinking about while you were saying that, is that So at the moment, you could pick up a weapon which you might consider to be not that great when it's not upgraded right out of the box, but you know that it's going to be great when it's fully upgraded. How would you feel if Embark found a way to kind of force you to take it into rounds to be able to get to the point where you can upgrade it? So instead of just leaving it in your stash and then kind of bringing back all the things you need to fully upgrade it, but you never take it in until it's fully upgraded. What if Embark kind of forced you to make this choice of going, okay, you're going to have to play rounds where you have a weapon that you know isn't as strong as you'd like it to be, but you have an end goal, almost like a quest, where you're trying to get that weapon upgraded, but you can only do it if you take it into a round. I'm just kind of thinking off the top of my head here, but to avoid that situation where people just leave it in the stash until they can fully upgrade it and then they bring it in for the first time.
I'm not so sure that that's necessarily a bad thing about keeping in the stash until you upgrade it, because you're given the incentive to continuously grab things to come back and upgrade it to actually then use it. And then it's that much worse when you do lose it. And so I feel like that's still a kind of a good thing.
Yeah, right.
I'm concerned a little bit though in terms of like, this brings me back to a mechanic, the Cycle Frontier. They had the Forge in their map called Theros Island, right? Now this wasn't for weapons, it was for armor and for like backpacks. And effectively it was one of the worst maps it was the worst map they ever made. It was horrible. People will fight me on that. It's okay. I'll fight you. I'll tell me where and when. I'll fight you. Don't worry about it. But the issue is that only the real top 1% of players were able to like A, make their way into that centralized zone in this map, and B, put their gear into this forge to then upgrade it beyond the point of what you can do anywhere else. So you couldn't do this anywhere else. You can only do it there. And it made these items, if you got the right rolls, mind you, items significantly better than their counterparts. And I feel like that kind of system really only benefits like the top 1% of PvP players in the community. And I know it's not the same thing that you necessarily put forth. It's just that's the instant memory that I have with that. I'm like, you know what? I'm not too keen on that kind of stuff, but I feel like if they can make it work in a different kind of way, maybe. But I don't know. Maybe it was just the map and the way it was laid out. But I'm not too thrilled with the idea personally.
Yeah, right. And something else I was kind of thinking about along those lines is, do you feel that all of the locations had enough variation in their difficulty, maybe from a PvE point of view, to match the variation that the weapons could have? In other words, I'm thinking maybe there could have been a few more areas where you could go, actually, we don't even want to go there yet because we're not upgraded enough. We want to leave it until we've done a couple of upgrades on each of these weapons I'm carrying. I kind of feel like there weren't too many places where you would go, actually, no, we're not ready for this yet. Perhaps they could have added a little bit more spice in a few locations for us.
I don't know. Maybe they're waiting for a fourth map to drop that kind of content on us. But
yeah, so the map itself. Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, maybe the fourth map is like it's the step up that you don't go to until you're ready for it.
Plus, I felt like PvE was in a really good place where like if you were fully prepared for it, like you had decent equipment and you were like respecting the position it had on you and like just taking the shots when you had a good position and good weaponry to actually go against it. It was manageable, right? Obviously not going against the queen with whatever you want or even a rocketeer, but it was one of those things where like the vast majority of PvE was very lethal if you just kind of stumbled your way into it unaware. I felt like that was a really, really great balance to that. My thing is that I feel like the PvE, there's not enough PvE that took substantial damage from like medium or like light ammo. I felt like that was the main reason you had to bring a heavy ammo weapon at any given time, is because that's the only way you can kill any kind of arcs. Not necessarily a bad thing in terms of balancing your loadout, but I feel like if they had more variety of the type of arcs you had available. So a great example would be like the ticks, those little spider bots. And I feel like if you just made them a little bit bigger, like the size of a wasp, for example, right? One, they'd be terrifying. Okay. But also if you gave them an actual gun, that could be a different variation, and you just make them move around a little bit more. And so if you make them work in packs inside of buildings, your slow firing heavy weapon is not going to be something you'd want to bring to bear in that kind of way. So it's kind of feel like a little bit more variation would then force you to have more variation in your loadout as well.
Yeah, I like that idea too. I definitely like the idea of maybe having a few more archetypes coming in, but I think they could definitely have like sort of mini bosses. So you have like a tick boss, which is just like a tick with a gun on it, right? And I think that would give quite a nice variation across the board for all the environmental enemies by adding some more variety into them.
And I just think like, did you ever play Dead Space?
No, I haven't.
All right, so it's gonna be hard to explain this at this point, but like I can imagine you have an arc that is inside of a building, a rather large complex, right? And it's basically its main thing is that it has a turret. That's its main thing is the main room, but it'll just send out a tentacle like out the hallway and like look for you, and then if it finds you, if it can actually like grab you, it'll actually literally just drag you into that room and then like let go of you, and then the turret will try to kill you at that point.
Right. Okay.
Be completely horrific, and it'd be like always one of those things where that could be one of those situations like, hey, do we want to go into this building? Because there could be a very real chance that it isn't like, oh, we're fighting another team. It's suddenly you're getting yanked into another room by a PvE, and it's like, okay, we need to be ready to kill that thing right off the rip, because if we want to sit there and try to organize our way through this building, that's always going to be a threat for us.
Yeah, yeah. I think they could make some variations to existing arc enemies by that would be similar to that. For instance, the standard turrets. What if they put that on an extendable arm, and if it was mounted close to a corner, it could actually retract around the corner to sort of hide once you started shooting at it. So then you're engaging with an enemy that's actually taking cover and is an environmental enemy as well.
These kind of tools for the AI to use, it'll help a lot in terms of the interactivity for the PvE. It's not just a simple, hey, increase their HP and call it a day. Make players really have to think about how they're engaging these enemies, which will make the PvE more engaging.
Yeah, and one thing I've sort of noticed, having watched a few other content creators' streams and so on, is I felt like a lot of people weren't using their full bag of tricks against arc enemies or even PvP opponents, right? So, for instance, smoke grenades were super OP, because if you could dump a heap of those, you had an escape route immediately to get away if you were getting overpowered by arc, or the lure grenades, that you could throw and have them directed
or the
off away from you as well. Yeah, exactly. Showstoppers. Yeah, all of those things. I felt like from what I'd seen from gameplay, people weren't using those things as much as they potentially could have.
And I think a great way of kind of showcasing that is that the bison, I know people had a hard time with it, but the bison's not that hard to kill if you had the right equipment on hand. So like the showstopper is one example, but you also have the shock mine, which is relatively easy to build as long as you have the recipe, mind you. You could bait the bison in, and a lot of people don't know this. Is like when it hits players, yeah, it stuns them for 2 seconds, but arcs, it stuns them for 10, which is an eternity at that point. So you can legitimately go, cool, I'm going to stun this large, arc, and then I'm going to dump an entire stack of snap grenades on the key points where I need to, like immediately as fast as I can, and then poop, and then at that point, it's almost dead already.
Yeah, yeah. And actually seeing this new weapon that was in that the video that came with the post, the Hull Cracker, right? Yeah. I was thinking actually that would be a weapon that would be nice to have variety as well in the ammo. So, it looks like there's 40 mil grenades that can be fired, but it would be interesting to have an option to be able to use like showstoppers that can be fired at a range. So your team might split up and you might, yeah, exactly. So you might have someone who's kind of off in a distance as one of your teammates, and their job is essentially to keep you safe either through smoke or keep the arc enemy being inefficient by throwing showstoppers at them. Well, the two other players are kind of doing the close combat or going into the harvester or whatever it is that they're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I just hope that the actual HE version of the grenade launcher rounds isn't effectively just a light impact grenade, because those were like very lackluster, very not worth their use. So even if you had a semi-automatic, gun of that, it'd be meh at best, I think. So there had to be something unique about it, but in that case, you'd probably have to reduce the fire rate down considerably. Even if it was just like a breech loading shot, like 40 millimeter grenade launcher, a la Vietnam era. But you gave an HE rounds possibility. Like effectively what it was is just basically a grenade. You can use your regular grenades, but effectively it was just they're able to shoot it more directly or farther or something like that. If that was like that, then I can see it being extremely strong. It just depends on how they want to balance it.
Yeah. I wonder how the grenade will behave if it is like an impact grenade. I kind of felt like the impact grenades would have actually served better if they'd been a fragmentary grenade only. So you could actually like bounce them off a door frame to go into a room. You know how you can hit a door frame and bounce it back.
Yeah. But the explosion
Almost at a
radius was so
180,
small
right?
that it wasn't really worth it to be at that point. So it's just, I think that was my main issue with
Yeah.
it. It's like the damage was so low, the impact, the blast radius was so small that as fast as you could throw it was still slower than some of the lowest TTK, some of the highest TTK guns in the game. So like if you were just trading damage with somebody, the impact grenades would lose almost every single fight. So it's kind of like, what was the point of that? And so
Yeah, and also the fact that it's third person, right? So
right.
the fact that they explode immediately, if you're third person peeking around the corner, then you can just back away from the door or whatever that you're in, and the grenade is completely ineffective. But if it can actually bounce and go inside, then you're like, okay, not only do I have to get away, but I have to make sure I can't be in range of a bounced grenade off the door frame.
And that's why I think the three grenades that were basically the most effective were basically the HE grenades, the snap grenades, and the trigger grenades. Those three basically had roughly the same blast radius, roughly the same damage. It just depends on their use case and what they wanted to use. The trigger grenade obviously was extremely strong, as the most overpowered grenade in the game. However, it was significantly harder to build, not by much, but it was harder to build, so it kind of balanced out.
Did you? I noticed in their post they never mentioned mines at all. I think I put a couple of mines down, and I was like, oh, these things are so obvious. I can't really imagine using them much because you're never going to get caught out by them. Did you use them much at all?
Oh yeah, it's a great effect too, actually.
Really?
Yes, because there's
Yeah, tell me about that.
From your point of view, they glow, but from the enemies, they don't.
Really?
Right. So,
Okay.
so yeah, so they glow for you because you can see them, right? It lets you know where they are, right? But they also
I
make
didn't
noise
realize
too.
that.
So like if person's really paying
Okay.
attention, they do it. My son and I, we used it. The damage on the pop-up mine, the lethal one, wasn't very big. It was like, I think it was 35, 40 points of damage, something like that. So it wasn't really significant. But we used it mostly as a tripwire to let us know someone was coming, because it was just us two, and we'd often fight against trios. And so when we were one flank, that was kind of like, we can't watch both reasonably well, so we're gonna go watch one and then put tripwires on this other door. I remember this one case where you just, cool, instead of just putting one, we just double them up. You put one on the bottom left corner of the door, put the other one on the bottom right corner of the door, make it extremely hard to see unless you're like third party peeking. And if you try to do that, the other one's gonna get you.
Gotcha. Okay. How did you work out that glow thing? Because it, like for me, that was, that's the sort of information that should be conveyed clearly to a player. And clearly, maybe it's just me, but I didn't pick up on the fact that what I could see from that glow around the mine sitting on the floor was not going to be visible to an opponent. And so I was like, this is hardly worth carrying because everyone can see it clearly.
Now, here's the thing.
So,
I'm doing a lot of assumption because there's no way someone would have walked in with two of them, because that's what ended up happening. The person walked in and he walked right into two of them. So there's no way you can't notice these things if they were glowing. And so it's ended up what happening is that we just heard pop, and they were like, we instantly just heard the explosion. Like, oh, there goes somebody. We go on the corner, and there he is, and we just finish him off.
Yeah, maybe it needs to be conveyed like a loot symbol or something with your, like a little blue circle or something to tell you it's your own mine, because you can set them off yourself, right? Like I put down a gas, the laser gas one, and jumped through it to test it, and obviously it went off.
That's the laser one. That's the laser. The pop-up mine and the shock one. You cannot set those off yourself. You can even you could even walk up and pick them back up again, which made them super useful because like if you could put them down and then immediately afterwards you could never touch it again because you would set it off, it would make them basically useless because you couldn't come back and pick them up. So at that point, every time you put them down, you had to guarantee the usage in order to justify what you were spending to make them.
You could definitely pick them up again, but if you jump through the laser, it will set off the mine. Because I tried it on a stairway and I was like, oh, I wonder if this will work. And then I was like, okay, well, if I put it on stairs, then as I jump through the laser, I know if it goes off, I'm going to at least get out of the gas pretty quickly because I'll land at the bottom of the stairs. And I definitely set it off as I jump through it.
Interesting. I don't think I ever used the laser gas one. I only ever used the pop-up explosive and the shock one.
Yeah, interesting. It sounds to me like they do need to tweak these a bit to make it a bit the information around what who they affect and who they don't.
For sure,
more obvious.
I like them a bit. I know there's some people who aren't a fan of the mines. I did like them because it allowed you some tactical flexibility. They weren't really all that useful when you're coming at it from a perspective of like us three with our guns, we can beat you in a gunfight, call it a day. But if you're like a solo or even a duo going up against another trio, and you're trying to get out, dropping a smoke grenade, dropping a mine here and there, door jam, these kind of more less than direct conflict methods are really great to have those tactical options.
Yeah, I would have used them a lot more if I'd known that, for instance, putting like a gas, the laser gas one at the top of a zip line, for instance, and then, because quite often you'll have an entire team come up a zip line more or less at the same time. And so if the first person triggers them off, then the people following have got to make a choice of either they're going to go back down or they're just going to accept they're about to go into gas. And you've got the advantage of knowing they're coming as well because of the noise of it going off.
I enjoyed it because the door jam was kind of a funny story for me. Is I got like 3 recipes of the door jam, even though and it took getting the 3rd recipe. They're like, fine, I'll try it. Okay, I'll try it.
Yeah.
And then when I finally did try it, I'm like, you know what? This is actually really easy to build, and it's actually kind of useful. It just basically jams the door as if you were kind of needing your crowbar to open it up. That's all it needed. Yep. So I'm like, in a lot of ways, I'm like, you know what? Having 1 or 2 of them that it was really, again, cheap to make, I'm like, that's not a bad idea.
Yeah, and it was the same with the, I can't remember what the sort of the barricade was called. Maybe it was called a barricade.
Yeah.
But I started to see that being used quite a lot, like around the dam and some of those open tunnel areas where the rooms are a bit wider. There was a few times we encountered squads and they immediately put up a barricade when we engaged with them to give themselves some cover, or at least so they could back off around a corner. And we actually started doing the same once we saw them doing that as well. So yeah, some of those tools, you didn't realize how useful they were until you actually sort of saw an opponent using them.
For me, we never really, the group I played with never really valued the barricades all that highly. I think because the way we fight was very mobile. It's all about finding different angles and kind of squeezing people out from like the side or something like that. So
the flanking, right.
For us, the fighting was always very mobile. So like having a stationary style item like that was particularly heavy to top it off. Wasn't really worth bringing in for a lot of us. Though I could see it being used, at least in my case, other people will use it just fine, but at least in my case, I could see it being used when you're deliberately trying to take on like a Rocketeer, for example, because the best place to do so is like on top of somewhere high, and that you don't always have your choice. You pick up the ladder in terms of like cover, and so that's more like to cut sightlines from anybody third partying you. Which brings me to another thing is that when you're more stationary, you're kind of like not dictating the fight, the pace of the battle, which means it could slow down. And if that battle slows down, you're more likely to get third party, which is another reason why we were always very like either all in or all gone. Like we were not going to try to sit there and try to siege out with somebody.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I think the times we used, say, the barricade was often, like I said, around that, not in the dam buildings as such, but as you go through the dam towards the tower, there's an area that is quite a lot of sort of open tunnels, I suppose you'd call them. And it's easy, with nowhere, you could easily duck behind every time. So they were quite handy just as a backup if you kind of got caught out in the open a little.
Oh yeah, and they did talk about the heavy shields. They were kind of, the way they worded it, it was kind of interesting. It's basically, I'm going to quote it now. And yes, you were right. The heavy shields were way too strong and the shield swapping was way too effective. I feel like that level of like, I think that that conveys a level of honesty, blunt, I guess so, just straight up just being blunt about it. But yeah, no, you were right, 100%. We were not thinking this through type situation. We're like, no, this is way too strong. Did you get that kind of feel from that statement as well?
Yeah, I think I like it when they just say things like that. It's just like, okay, it's clear to everybody that these things don't work the way we intended. So it's nice and honest. They haven't followed that sentence up with anything about how they're going to resolve that issue. But clearly, it's just a way of them saying you were right, and we're thinking about the solution for it.
Right, and I think it's just, you can obviously say it can be, that phrase could be swapped in with like we heard you, like loud and clear, and that's ultimately I think what a community really just wants. They want to be heard. Yeah.
I've got a question actually. Just thinking about equipment, what were your thoughts on the snap hook? And let me give you a bit more context. The reason I ask is it's probably one of the highest mobility features in the game, right? And I think some people might have been thinking, hey, this is actually getting a little bit too like the finals, where you can sort of move around at high speed, whereas the game shouldn't really be about that. Did you feel it kind of crossed the line on that front?
I think it did, but only for a couple of reasons, right? And I think if you iron these out, it might, I think people's concerns will go away. For one, you could use it to avoid fall damage. So that was one thing you could do with it. Because basically, if you were on top of somewhere high and you were able to find somewhere low to shoot it to, it would just yank you right to the ground as if you weren't falling even faster than you would have normally with gravity.
Right.
So you can use it to circumvent fall damage. So right away, like if you just got rid of that part right there, its usability becomes significantly like less, because at that point it's more about climbing, and then it's not so much about giving you a reason to come down now anymore.
Yeah.
That's for one. Two, obviously we talked about it before in the previous episode, where like the fact that you can safe pocket is just dumb. I think it's just entirely too strong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That you can safe pocket an item like that. I think, it's just, there's got to be a limit on what you can safe pocket and what you can't, right? And I believe what they had before was basically guns and like ammo were not able to safe pocket, right?
Yeah. One of the times I saw it being used in an interesting way was people running towards an open extraction elevator on dam or spaceport, and they used it to cover the last like 30 yards.
The dash.
Right? Yeah, straight into the elevator and out of view. So they weren't going to get that classic, you're running towards the elevator and get taken out at the last moment.
Yeah, I think if you made the animation to use it, like not be able to do it while you're running, and so it basically makes you a stationary target when you're using it. Like it makes it a more tactical decision to use it, right? And I feel I think that's really what people were wanting. I don't think they have issue with the mobility per se. They just how easy it was to use and how hard it was to counter.
Yeah, I like that. Anything that adds more tactical thinking to the game, I think is going to be a positive.
One thing that I thought of is that because it gave me an idea about other tech items, other type of gadgets to use, right? And there was I'm gonna mess up the name, but it's a photoelectric cloak or whatever it was.
Yeah, that's a photoelectric cloak.
Okay, so did you have any experience with that?
Yeah, I took it in once just to see how it worked. It was pretty amusing. It was like walking around with a coat hanger over your head. So, and it works really well. You can stand right under a wasp with it, and they can't see you. But I don't think I really used it for meaningful purpose.
Right. So I think that if this maybe not be suitable for the gameplay mode that it is right now, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, right? But for like a more larger scale in terms of like clans and like or higher end equipment, I felt like an item like that, but with a wider range of usability, being able to be put down like a mine or whatever. Like I'm gonna plant this down, and within a certain radius, the arcs cannot see us. I think that item would probably be a lot more enticing to use.
Yeah, so sort of a variation on the lure grenade, right?
Right, like the reverse of the lure grenade, basically. It's just like anything that's right here, arcs do not see it, period. Like, And I think another variation as well, because it could be the exact opposite of what a snap hook is. So like a snap hook could be, with the changes that we discussed just now, specializing in going up, gaining elevation. There could be maybe like mini jets, like a person could wear on their belt or feet or whatever. That could be one of their items that they have. Or even like, what are those things called? Those suits where they kind of like hang gliders, but like they have like webs between your arms and your legs and whatnot. Like the glide suits.
Like wingsuits, yeah.
Wingsuits. So I feel like if you had like a gadget that would like deploy like a wingsuit, like you have to activate it, you have to bring it out like you would a snap hook, and then you can jump off and you can use that, but maybe like it wouldn't be like a straight up glider. It'd be more like, hey, I'm gonna stop myself from getting fall damage. And I think that would be kind of useful, and it would be interesting because it was, okay, I can get up on top of something, but now I can also get down. But these are two separate items, so you're risking double the things. But someone can just bring just that portion, be like, all right, I want to avoid fall damage whenever I can. And so I'll just, when I'm on top of a roof and I need to get away or pursue someone, I switch that item, jump off the ledge there, use it just before I hit the ground, because that's how it would work or something like that. And then boop, you don't get fall damage and you continue on running. What do you think about that?
It's funny you say it, actually, because during the preview event for Tech Test 2, I think I was playing with one of the developers, and we were up the spaceport towers, and I was like, you know what would be really cool is that you can find up there like a base jumping parachute, and it's a single use thing, so you can't use it more than once, and it has like a 90% success of an opening rate. But if you use it, you actually get some sort of reward or something for using it. But you have a 10% chance where you're going to land at the bottom and need your teammates to revive you. It was just an idea. I don't know if what other people would think of it, but I thought it'd be pretty funny.
That'd be interesting for sure. I think that you could do something like that. I think what would end up happening if we went for the 10% factor right there, what ended up happening
Yeah.
is a particularly aggressive team could go up there, look for where the action's at. All right, cool. Let's do a base jump. Go that direction. So I can easily instantly see it being used for that.
Yeah. I guess you'd only have one though, so your other teammates would have to go the other way. But
Yeah.
like sort of a novelty item more than anything. But,
For sure, and think about it. That could actually be used for loadouts, like the wingsuit. Like, okay, cool. I want to play as a sniper, and so my job is to get into higher areas and kind of like be able to, be in positions. But then I have to catch up to my teammates. Having that wingsuit item would basically, allow me to do that. But it would, negate whatever else I could do. So, and we talked about it before, where these items could be nerfed in a way that they didn't work with other stronger items. I think in the most sense it would make, like, all right, cool, you can't use these items while wearing heavy armor because like you're too heavy or something like that, right? Or you can't use them when you have too much in your bag. It could be just another factor as well.
I think one of the things that probably they also have to account for is because it's a type of game where you're spawning in and people kind of know approximate locations where spawns might occur, is that any mobility can't provide teams the opportunity to immediately go and attack spawn points right on spawning. So you can't come in and let's say they allowed you to upgrade zip lines so they can go from 50 yards to 100 to 150 yards in length as an upgrade, right? Potentially, if you had 3 people coming in with fully upgraded zip lines, you can now go 450 yards within a minute and be attacking someone who's just spawned in,
right,
sort of a third of the way around the map. So I think they would have to account for those things with any kind of mobility, whether it be a wingsuit or a zip line or a snap hook, that really they're there for single kind of use that's not taking advantage of anything, almost like defensive use quite a lot of the time.
That's a big factor, and I always appreciated when they talked about not letting the public know exactly how many players are in a lobby, or exactly where the spawn points are at, or exactly what the stagger rates are going to be, to prevent that exact thing. I remember my time playing ABI. It was kind of like, it's one of those moments where you realize you learn something about the game that makes the game basically change for you in a dramatic way, because now once you learn the tactic, once you learn the strategy, you can no longer unlearn it. Because now you can choose not to use it, but you can never choose it to not be used on you. So you have to.
Yeah.
It becomes basically you can no longer not account for it anymore. And one of the things that it was basically you knew the spawn location. So as soon as you spawn, everyone spawned at the exact same time. So you instantly just started running towards one of those locations to try to catch somebody out. And so I appreciate the mechanics they've put in place to try to help prevent that. I think you made a great point in terms of the mobility aspect of it. I think a lot of those factors can kind of curve that down a little bit, though.
Yeah. Something you mentioned just before about the number of players. We do actually know a bit of info about that, which was, I think, Embark Shy, if I remember the name correctly, was with Clean on a stream, and he asked them to guess how many players were in a round, and they guessed 18 and 15, and he said both of those are wrong, but I'm not telling you what the number is. And based on that, I would say it has to be either, my guess is it's either 21 or 24 would be the most likely.
And then you also don't even know if like they try to maintain a certain amount of players throughout the raid based on their stagger spawns, or that's the maximum they're going to have, period, right?
Yeah. Pretty sure they do, and the reason we know that as well is because when I was watching Shroud's stream, one of his early streams, they spawned back into the same raid that they'd been knocked out of.
Yeah.
So it's definitely trying to build the numbers back up when a squad gets taken out. Up to I think the latest is like 18 minutes is the latest you can spawn in.
Right. At the time for Tech Test 2, 18 minutes was the lowest amount of time you could have, which I wasn't a huge fan of, by the way. But it was just one of those things where I can appreciate that, because if you don't
you thought it was too short?
I thought 18 minutes was too short. Yeah. I think a lot of times when you spawn in, like, this is going to happen regardless how much time you have, but if you spawn on the opposite side of the map where you need to be for a particular objective or goal, right, it's annoying for sure. But if you have, like, say, 40 minutes or 30 minutes to do it, it's not that big of a deal. But if you only have 18 minutes and you know that the lobby is consistently being refilled up, the odds of you making it there without being reckless about it is pretty low. So a lot of times when we were spawning in that late and we needed to be somewhere across the map, we would just reset. We would instantly go to the first evac available. We reset, do it again.
Interesting. Right. Well, that's good. I hope the devs hear that because, that's good to know because people shouldn't be playing that way, right? I mean, you had to do it from your point of view, but it's not the intention, right? At 18 minutes, you should. And we're going, hey, we're just not doing the A plan, but we've got time to do our B plan, whatever that is.
Right. And a lot of times, just for the sake of playing the game, we would go into the closest area to like loot up everything and kind of work our way to some action or what have you. But a lot of times, it's when you're having that little of time, it's one of those things where like I can't play without being reckless. I just don't want to play that way, and so it's one of those cases where like I'd rather just evac.
Yeah.
That was my mentality regarding that. I feel like with all of that being staggered, I feel like if you don't consistently refill the server up to a certain point, as a player for a fact, given how long the raid's been going on, there's less and less threats to worry about. And I feel like that's right. Not great either.
Yeah, if you're inside that last 5 minutes, pretty much the chances of encountering another team are pretty slim. Although at that point, obviously, especially if you're going to a raider hatch, you got no worries at all, right?
Yeah.
But if you're at one of the main elevators, then it might be different. But generally, those last few minutes, you feel like you're pretty easy to do whatever you please.
All right, so this brings us down to the last thing here. Now, they did, for those of you who are listening, and I'll be checking your emails because apparently the surveys have started going out. They're putting out an additional survey through emails to give them feedback, give Embark feedback on the tech test too. Now, in theory, I can't tell you. I'm not sure if I could tell you whether or not I even have it. So we're not going to talk what we did put into it or what questions are on there. I'm just going to ask blanketly, and we're going to start off with Rockhound. If they ask you, hey, give us like your top 1-2 things that you absolutely feel like needs to get addressed, or things we haven't talked about yet, maybe that they've kind of already started saying, hey, we're going to address this. What are the kind of things that you really want to see from here to October?
Well, that's a pretty open question, which is fine. I think, and this is probably going to be a conversation in itself for another podcast, but I think anti-cheat is going to be a big topic of conversation around the game at some point. And I've already seen some posts on Reddit about it, and people also talking about ping restrictions. I'm not a fan of those because I like to play with my friends that are in the US, for instance, and I would hate to see that opportunity taken away. I think one of the things I like about gaming is it brings people together from around the world, and I think I would rather that people can play, squad up together from different countries than use that as a method of stopping cheating if people consider that to be a viable way to do it. So I think probably just wanting to know a bit about what steps Embark will take towards anti-cheat, but maybe they'll keep that to themselves. As far as changes to the game go, I think any of these things we've kind of talked about that make the game more tactical and less arcadey, or where you're using novelty methods to get around something. I would rather that people have to kind of follow thoughtful tactics is probably so as long as they stick to that as a pillar, I think that'll set the game in good stead. It's hard to pick things that are needing changes because the game was in a pretty good state overall. And we've kind of covered a lot of the things we talked about today, that, little nerfs to weapons or weapons that maybe need just their range changed, those kind of things. I don't feel like there were a whole bunch of things that I was going, oh, this definitely needs changing, unless it's something like the shield swapping kind of thing. What about you? Is there anything that leaps into mind for you?
Well, for me, and I'll probably end up making a video about this this particular topic, is that since they've said there's not going to be any wipes, and we talked about this before, and that's a big concern for me. Not because I particularly care for them one way or the other. It's just that I would like to see or hear, I'm sure they have their ideas or whatever, like the issues that wipes deal with are not insignificant. And so I would definitely love to hear what their ideas are in terms of what solutions are they going to bring to bear with gear inflation, for example, right? And so it's one of those things where it's like, I want to know what the end game looks like, because I plan on playing this game for a very long time. I will probably spend the majority of my time playing in that point of the game. So I would like to know what the majority of the time I'll be playing the game is going to be, whether that's going to look like, essentially.
Yeah, and just to be clear for people listening, I think they've said there won't be any compulsory wipes as opposed to there won't be any wipes at all. So that does leave open the opportunity to have like self-wiping, because you are rewarded for making that choice to self-wipe, or something similar to that.
For sure, for sure. But Hunt has a similar mechanic, and its economy is significantly more shallow than every other extraction shooters. And even
Yeah.
in that particular case, I saw no reason to prestige, none whatsoever. I literally have the exact same. I never prestiged one time in that game because I never saw the point. Because I didn't feel
And when
like
you say
working through
that,
those
was
guns.
so it was, what were you rewarded with if you did, what was the prestige?
I could be
for those
completely,
that
I could
don't-
be completely wrong, but essentially it was just a new badge saying how many times you've prestiged for.
Right.
And to me, the reason why I'm very skeptical about whether or not a voluntary wipe system could get people to wipe in the numbers that made it meaningful, right? To completely
Yeah.
negate the gear inflation factor, because all it would take is basically, it's like, yeah, the people who run through the content constantly will wipe themselves if they want to, but the vast majority of players will have the gear inflation that we talked about, and if they have it, the people who are running through it will also have it when they kill them as well.
Yeah. And if you think about a game like the finals, where there's rewards like Ruby gun skins and so on for those that have really, achieved above and beyond the average player by a long way, do you feel like, for you specifically, do you feel like if there was a cosmetic, like a complete outfit that was available for being top tier end game player, and that you're willing to give up by wiping, would that be something that you'd be attracted to, or would it be something that you don't really care about so much?
Yes and no. For one, when it comes to cosmetics in game, I feel very personal when it comes to the cosmetics that I choose. I try to customize my characters as best I can in terms of like trying to make myself unique. So I try not to like use full sets. So that's why I like the finals cosmetic system way more than Arc Raiders, which I hope they end up leaning more towards. But I feel like
Yeah,
something
the variety of being able to swap and change, minor parts of the outfit, you mean?
right. And so if you tell me, hey, you're gonna have this whole outfit or part of an outfit or whatever every time you prestige, what if I don't end up actually liking the thing? At that point, it is a flex, yeah, but if I don't physically like the actual like the skin, I'm not gonna wear it. So I have even less incentive to prestige because I'm not gonna wear it. On the flip side, though, when I said the yes part, there could be something different, right? There could be player cards. You've played Apex Legends?
No, I haven't.
All right. All right, so Apex Legends have player cards, right? It's not unique to Apex Legends, but that's probably the most predominant example, right? And so, so you have these items that you can get, and so these items that you can get will affect, when you pick a certain character, it affects their pose, it affects the background color, and certain achievements are like badges that are on there. So you can choose up to 3 badges. This could have changed since the last time I've played, mind you.
Right.
And I feel like a player card could be used in a similar way, in the sense that you see the player card when you're grouped up with them, or you see them in the menu, or when they kill you and you can see the player card of the guy who just killed you, right? I feel like that could be a really good flex, because that doesn't interfere with your cosmetics, but it does let you have that ego, flex on somebody, where you're like, hey, look at all the things I've accomplished, look how many times I've prestiged. At that point, I think it's a little bit more incentive. I don't think it's enough, but I think it's one of the many tools they could probably use.
Yeah. It's sort of almost like a dog tag system, I think, that other games use as well. I think Tarkov, right, has dog tags, is it? That you can pick up and keep. Yeah, I think about having something that signifies that level that a player has achieved. It just has to be done the right way, and maybe with a bit of variety. So for those players that aren't into wearing a bright pink astronaut outfit, well, that's fine. You've got a choice of something else instead.
And I think you could time it as well. So let's say you were going to do something like that, something unique. You can simply say, okay, you can wipe only every so often when you've fully completed the campaign, right? Let's say they introduce new cosmetics that you can only get through that system. And I know some people might not like that, but like, hey, they have to kind of incentivize you to like do it one way or the other. And if they do it based on of kind of like a battle pass system, where basically, hey, you know what? You can do that. You can get this skin when you prestige, but people will wait until they get one that they like. But they're like, no. You have to do them in order, which means if you didn't do the one from last season or 2 months ago, whenever it was, you got to do that one again, go through the content again, and then do it again for that particular skin. So it incentivizes people to do it when they can, because they know when next time comes around, if it's a good skin, they can actually get it right away.
Yeah, I think one thing is for certain is that there is an opportunity here for Embark to put their thinking caps on and to deal with wipes in a way that is completely new. And I think, the opportunity is waiting for a developer to do this around extraction shooters, where we all go, oh, why hasn't anyone thought of this before? I'd really like to see them come up with something novel and something that the community piques the interest of the community.
I think I was debating it, but now I'm not debating anymore. I for sure will put out a video because I already have an idea for something like this. I feel like just to kind of muse a little bit, I think Arc Raiders can have its cake and eat it too. You can create like in-game content like clans or whatever it is, in which that part of it can be wiped because you're no longer having the negative effects on people who don't want to do it, but people who are participating in that level of gameplay are more than likely to do it because it gives them some kind of incentive to do so. It's not just more gear or more skins. It's additional other factors. And so I'll probably end up making a video on that. Not probably, I will make a video on that. You heard it here. Call me to it. But
I'll look forward to watching it.
So that brings us to about an hour or so. So I think we'll probably end up calling it from here. Anyone who's listening, we thank you so much for hanging out with us and having our discussion with us, hearing us out. You can check out all the links then in the description. I'll let Rockhound send us off here in just a moment. Yes, his links are on there. Check his channel out if you haven't already. If you're looking for more players to group up with for Arc Raiders in the future, there's Discords, various Discords down in the links. Just check all that out. Thank you so much for being here. Rockhound, send us out.
I'm going to leave you with one little glorious piece of information. Well, kind of glorious. It's depending on where you live, there's either 119 or 120 days to go until Arc Raiders releases.
Woo!
And on that note, thanks for having me on board once again, Gecko, and everyone enjoy the rest of their day. Kia kaha, stay strong.